All right, thanks for staying with us. Last Friday, President Muhammadu Buhari suspended the embattled Chief Justice of Nigeria, that's Justice Walter Onnoghen, and appointed a new acting CJN in the person of Ibrahim Mohammed. Now, that move further complicated an already controversial situation that had members of the bar, government, politicians, and Nigerians on different sides.
And even Justice Onnoghen is challenging government's decision in court. Since Friday, there have been protests and meetings over Onnoghen's suspension, and the new week will also see similar activities. The National Judicial Council and NJC has summoned an emergency meeting over this issue on Tuesday, while the Senate caucuses of both the All Progressives Congress and the People's Democratic Party in the upper chamber of the National Assembly are billed to meet in Abuja today.
Also meeting today is the Nigerian Bar Association, NBA, with members of the National Executive Committee, that's a NEC, asked to gather in Abuja. The question at the root of all this uproar is the legality or otherwise of Justice Walter Onnoghen's suspension as Chief Justice of Nigeria. Well, suspended Chief Justice of Nigeria Walter Onnoghen is the chief architect of his own misfortune, and that's according to the presidency.
Yes, the federal government, while reacting to the coordinated statements from the United States, the United Kingdom, as well as the European Union on Justice Onnoghen's suspension, said it was wrong for the trio to link the suspension to the upcoming elections.
Well, we do have a lawyer in Abuja studio, Kunle Edun, to talk to us about this developments. We expect to be joined by other gentlemen who understand the legalities of these issues. Good morning and thanks for joining us. Okay.
Good morning.
Yes. Well, Kunle, the CJN suspension has been described by the NBA, the Nigerian Bar Association, and so many others as a coup against the Constitution, that it is a constitutional coup, that is what they're saying, and a coup against Nigeria's democracy. Are these extremes when in terms of, description of what has happened?
Thank you very much. Good morning, Nigerians. Nigerians are beckoned upon by the Nigeria Bar Association to witness a disaster that has just been committed, a constitutional crisis that has just been perpetrated by the executive arm of the federal government of Nigeria. Like the president of Nigeria Bar Association did say, Professor Paul Usoro SCN, it is a coup. It's a coup that has never happened before. The Chief Justice of the Federation of Nigeria is an institution. And that institution is what we must protect at all times. Because when we talk about rule of law, when we talk about democracy, we have three arms of government: the judiciary, the executive, and the legislature. Each of them is supposed to be equal to the other. But that is not what we have found out. The President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria does not have the power, neither does he have the authority under any law to suspend and or remove the Chief Justice of the Federation. Unilateral, he cannot. Because of the separation of powers doctrine, we have entrenched in our Constitution an institution called the National Judicial Council. That is to guarantee the independence of judiciary. Before you can remove any judge, how much more a justice of the Court of Appeal or justice of the Supreme Court, then how much more again the Chief Justice of Nigeria, you must pass through the process of the NJC. The NJC must make that recommendation. And that is the essence of the provision of Section 292 of the Constitution. And we must all know, Nigerians must listen today. The President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria swore to an oath to uphold the Constitution. That Constitution is being breached right now.
Yeah, but the presidency,
mode.
if I may come in, Kunle, the presidency is saying that the Chief Justice of Nigeria has not demonstrated himself to be above board like Caesar's wife, that a person who holds such high echelon in government really should not be found wanting. How much more? Number one, the CJN was brought before the CCT because of a serious breach of law regarding his assets declaration. Now, according to the presidency, this is not a mere technicality, you know, like innocently placing a document in a wrong file or mistakenly placing yesterday's date on a document. Are these issues, the issue at hand right now, is it not serious enough to warrant the suspension of the CJN?
Thank you very much. The last time I checked our constitution, the office of the President of Federal Nigeria is not a recognized court of law. The President of Federal Nigeria has no bias to determine any criminal charge before any court. There is a charge before the CCT. And the NBA has come out with a position that the CCT does not have jurisdiction to hear that charge. They must go through the process of the NJC. The NBA, as a matter of fact, would want to avoid going into the merits of the charge. But we are talking about the processes, the procedure laid down by the Constitution. It is not the call of the President of Nigeria to say the CJN is corrupt, is immoral. No. Is presumed innocent until otherwise found guilty. That is why we have rule of law.
All right.
By the way, we are all aware that the Court of Appeal, only recently, I think that was last Wednesday, made an order, a restraining order against the CCT. So what have we seen again? Another violation of rule of law. That order made by the Court of Appeal, a superior court, to the CCT, as well as the CCT is not even a court, it's a tribunal under the executive arm. So we can very well say that the executive arm is trying the judiciary. And I say it again, Nigerians, that is why we have the NJC. And by the way, why is the executive arm of government afraid of the NJC? In the NJC there, we have very, very credible Nigerians. We have chief judges of some states there. We have past justices of the Supreme Court, some judges of the Court of Appeal there. And we have credible Nigerians that are also there.
All right, if you could, if you could,
of the private part that are there in the NJC.
If you could allow me come in this time,
why jump the process?
If you could allow me come in this time, to further pursue your submission earlier, Section 292, subsection 1, as you rightly mentioned, provides for job security for public judicial officer, except when the president acts on an address in case of removal and supported by 2/3 of majority of Senate. Now, we understand the Senate will meet tomorrow to reconvene. What do you expect as the outcome of this convention?
Why I remain the National Press Secretary of Nigeria Bar Association, I would not want to speak for the Senate. However, the President of Nigeria Bar Association, Paul Soro SN, has already called upon Nigerians, and particularly the National Assembly, to perform its constitutional role, because a constitutional breach has been committed by the President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. And we are saying that the Senate of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, the House of Rep, they should stand up and do the right thing. Protect the independence of the judiciary, protect the rule of law, and anything that will cause a breach today, tomorrow, they should stand against it. What the NBA actually is doing is not just to protect or fight for Honorable Justice Walter Onnoghen. We are talking about processes. We must respect our laws. We must uphold rule of law at all times. Because tomorrow, similar thing can play out. A governor of a state who doesn't like the face of a chief judge of that state can just come up and probably get an order from a customary court or even a native court and remove the chief judge of that state.
Now,
and by the way, we are all aware of what happened recently.
Let me ask you, how grave really is the failure to declare assets, especially by a person of the status of the CJN? How grave is this really?
It's a very serious issue because the law provides that every public officer and judicial officer mandatorily should declare its assets and liabilities. There's every, I think it's every 4 years or 4 years, as case may be. And upon attainment of a particular office, you also declare your assets. Leaving the same office, you also declare your assets. Now, the CJN was alleged to have made some statements admitting these errors. Probably they said he forgot. Now, we also are aware that the law also provides that, particularly the law regulating the procedures at the CCT, even the CCB, that when a person admits an allegation, like in this case, that he did not declare some of its assets, then it shall not be necessary for such a person to be charged before the CCT. That is a jurisdictional issue. So we were all surprised when we just saw from nowhere an ex parte order removing the Chief Justice of Nigeria. That is an aberration.
Okay. All right, we will be back. We'll be back to you. Just stay with us. Let's now bring in on Skype a lawyer and senior advocate of Nigeria, Onnoghen. Thank you very much indeed for joining us this time. Hello, can you hear us? Hello, can you hear us?
It seems the senior. Okay.
Okay. Can you hear us now? Can you hear us now?
All right. Well, if faintly, I can hear you very well.
Okay. All right. Well, while they try to establish,
I can hear you now.
Okay. Very well then. Thank you very much indeed for joining us this time. Well, it was perceived that the CJN was trying to shield himself from prosecution. You remember that he has postponed the meeting of the National Judicial Council indefinitely. And then the president also said...
I cannot hear you very well.
Okay, all right. We'll have to try to fix that while we bring in our guests right here in the studio who's just joining us.
Yes.
I can hear you now.
Okay, all right. Let me come back to you now. Can you hear us very clearly now? All right, let's now bring in Mr. Larewaju Ajanaku is a lawyer. He's here in the studios with us while they try to establish full contact with our guest. Well, thank you very much indeed for joining us.
Good morning.
Well, it was perceived that the CJN was trying to shield himself from being tried. And one of the steps taken was to postpone the meeting of the National Judicial Council indefinitely. And the president also made reference to orders and counter orders coming from courts and all of that, and so on and so forth. Does that hold substance as far as you're concerned as a legal practitioner?
Thank you very much. When acts like this begin to crop up, individuals, people who are in the know and people who should know, will begin to feel very uncomfortable. You see, that session that was to be held, the National Judicial Council, was to be the 80th meeting. And there are times scheduled for these meetings to come up. Now, if the Honorable Chief Justice of Nigeria has been indicted in one form or the other and or alleged to have committed an offense, infraction against established laws, and he was also to be the chair of the meeting that was to hold by the NJC, he immediately, 2 days before the time, suspended that when all the members of the NJC were already in Abuja for the meeting. One will begin to think that, well, yes, there was more to it than meets the eye. Why will you just immediately suspend such a meeting? A meeting where your matter will have been discussed. And in the discussion of your matter, you humbly be asked to step aside while they deliberate on these issues that are arising. But you didn't allow that to come up. Any literate or anybody who has a conscience will begin to think that there was more to it. That's one. Now, look at it. You have ordinarily, as you have seen, because you have seen statements made by him, his statement in his own handwriting, confessing to having complied with the laid down rules. You see, ordinarily, because everybody is seeing it in it, or so many people are seeing it in different perspectives, say an affront to the judiciary and all that, because one sees him as the Chief Justice, it flows from him, the head of the executive, of the head of the judiciary in Nigeria today. And people begin to say, look, why not just the judiciary that is on trial? All lawyers are on trial, the courts are on trial, right? But we're talking about somebody who heads, not judiciary per se. Don't let us put the two together. If we do that, we won't be able to separate him
from the judiciary as
a
whole.
Exactly.
Okay, let's bring back.
For him.
Okay, let's just put you on hold a little. We're going to try as much as possible to get all the elements in the course of this discussion. Let's go back to our guest on Skype, who's joining us on Skype, lawyer and the senior advocate of Nigeria, Onnoghen. Thanks for staying with us, and good morning again to you. Can you hear me clearly? Can you confirm that, please?
Good morning. Good morning, Nigeria.
Very good. Now, talking about this suspension, it looks like the Constitution, is somewhat mute on the suspension from office. Not now. Is this a legal cul-de-sac that we find ourselves, or is this loophole what the federal government may have taken advantage of in suspending the Chief Justice of Nigeria?
Thank you very much, TVC, and thank you very much for setting appropriate public agenda on this subject. Now, we must bear in mind that the president is a constitutional president. He derives his powers from the Constitution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. The office of the CJN is similarly established by the Constitution. The office of the Senate President and the Speaker of House of Reps also established by the Constitution. Now, as a mechanism for checking the president cannot unilaterally, without a process, remove or suspend the Senate President or the Speaker of the House of Representatives, or indeed the CJN. There is a procedure to it. There have been allegations against the president himself that are in the public domain. Look at the issue of the certificate, which the president said initially he gave it to the Army Council. The Army Council said it was not to them. He said it was Cambridge he wrote, Cambridge denied, and then he had an attestation. People had accusations against the president, but it was not open to the Senate President or to the CJN to suspend the president. It is also not open to any head of the other arms of government to suspend one of the other. There are procedures for taking any one of them out of office. The whole point that is being made here is that where there is a provision of the law that says you must do a thing in a particular way, you must do it in that particular way.
Yeah, but the problem seems to be that the Constitution that you refer to, especially the Section 157 of the Constitution, which among other things, talks about only while acting in the support or recommendation of the Senate over the person's misconduct, and that by 2/3 majority of the Senate, that, such a person can be removed, and that whether from inability to discharge his duty owing to infirmity of mind or body or any other cause. Now, when we underscore this any other cause, doesn't it leave it open to discretion, which may be what the president has applied here?
Those are some of the problems, with a situation like this turns everybody into a lawyer, into a judge, we cannot continue to ride an unruly horse that public morality is. The interpretation of any law, including the Constitution, is the sole prerogative of the courts. And that is why it is the court that should have determined, not the president. The president cannot, give an interpretation that suits him to the provision of that particular constitution. If there's an attorney general, if there's a need for an interpretation of what that means, it ought to be determined, by the court. It is not the moment you allow everybody to give an interpretation that suits him to any provisions of the law, you are bound to arrive at anarchy. And that is exactly what we might be driving towards.
Let's put you on hold, Senior Advocate of Nigeria, Mr. Onnoghen. I'll be back with you. Let's now talk to Mr. Kule Ado, National Publicity Secretary, Nigerian Bar Association. As argued by so many people, based on Section 292, subsection 1, that it's only the National Judicial Council that can recommend the removal of the CJN, Chief Justice of Nigeria. Now, would the actions of the acting CJN, the current acting CJN, Honorable Justice Mohammed Tanko, not be tantamount to illegality, since the current CJN has not been, properly removed from office?
With respect to Honorable Justice Tanko Mohammed, who the President of Nigeria swore in as the acting CJN, the Nigerian Bar Association will today discuss on this issue and issue a statement in that regard. For now, we have not made any statement with regards to the present appointment in acting capacity of Honorable Justice Tanko Mohammed. However, we still stand by the statement released by the President of Nigeria Bar Association that we do not recognize the purported removal and or suspension of Honorable Justice Walter Onnoghen as the Chief Justice of the Federation. We do not recognize the procedure and the process. And if we do not recognize the procedure and the process, it goes to show that everything that was done subsequent to that wrong process or erroneous process, we may not be able to recognize it. However, a categorical statement to that effect with regards to the appointment of Honorable Justice Tanko Mohammed as acting CJN will be made by the National Executive Committee of the NBA today at its meeting holding in Abuja in a few hours' time.
If I may go back to the question that I asked earlier, which you did not address, as far as I'm concerned, would his actions not be termed illegal, since the current, I beg your pardon, the suspended CJN has not been properly removed from office? Justice Tanko Mohammed's actions, would they not be illegal?
The truth of the matter is that you cannot put something on nothing and expect it to still stand. There is a 40 foundation. There's a 40 root presently. So anything you put on top certainly will not be able to stand. That is reasonable. That is normal. So if we are saying we don't recognize the process that was used by the president to remove Honorable Justice Walter Onnoghen, that should tell Nigerians that we do not recognize every subsequent act as legal. The president of the federal government must comply with the provisions of the Constitution. He must. The Constitution is above him. The president cannot say that he's above the law. No, he must. So you must follow due process. By the way, if you want to appoint an acting CJN, you must also go through the NJC. It didn't go through the gamut of the NJC. However, the NEC of NBA, will issue a categorical statement on that. Let us await the statement from the NEC and the President of Nigeria Bar Association on that.
Okay, let's bring it back to the studio right here with Lanre Ajanoku. It looks like the Constitution is very, very, very ambiguous and vague, if I could, respectfully say so, from the point of view of an ordinary, Nigerian who really is not a lawyer. And because, look, lawyers like yourself, you've been looking at this from different angles using the same Constitution. Now, the Interpretation Act, Chapter 192, seems to also empower the president to remove who he has appointed, So, it's the same constitution that we're talking about here.
One angle that we should look at these provisions from would be that the main constitution is the 1999 constitution, as amended. And people are saying that the interpretation section that you mentioned gave certain powers, and will argue, rightly too, in their respective views, that that interpretation section is inferior to the main body of the constitution. That's what people say. That's why you have two sides to a coin. And we have had arguments in that regard. People will say, no, there has not been a very profound pronouncement in respect of that section 192 and the provision, the main contents of that of the same constitution that we're talking about. I can stand on the provisions of the interpretation section to do certain things. What those things that I do will remain standing until they are set aside by court of law. And you can call it illegality. You can call it any name you so desire. Once I have done it, I can't undo what I have done. But there is a process that you, that feels bad, terrible about what I have done, that you will take to ensure that what I have done is undone. That was undone. But then how do you do it? You now go to the law courts to say, court, look, this action of this president was not done in good faith, that was not done according to law, so reverse it. So when you reverse it, if the court... Like
the NBA has said, and a few others.
Well, yes, let's see.
Including the appeal court that has said status quo should remain, that, you know, no authority should in any way remove the CJN in the time being. You see,
not that it should be removed, just status quo should be maintained.
Status quo should be maintained, yes. Yes.
But then, now look at it. You see, there is this element of not being open from the executive. And we also find this element of not being caught unawares of this executive by actions of certain elements that I've seen in the judiciary. Everything that is happening has undercurrents of politics, very clear. But then, each side of the divide is trying to protect and ensure that whatever happens, either now rather, will affect the tomorrow. They're trying to secure the tomorrow today. That's the undercurrent politics there. But as it were, now look at it. Look, what the CJN has done, is it shameful? Answer is yes. He has confessed that I did this. These things that he said he did, remember, the last time
he forgot.
He forgot. Excuse me, a Chief Justice of Nigeria said he forgot. If that statement was coming from me or one other person that's on the street, you want to pardon such a person. You cannot even pardon me for saying that I forgot. Look,
the chief interpreter of the law.
Of the law, 2011. These are the crux of it. 2011, he made a declaration. It could be dated, it could be seen from what he declared that even as far back as 2005, he had some things that he didn't declare. 2011 to 2016, how many years? 5 years. He ought to have declared in another 4 years. You are not supposed to wait for anybody, because this declaration is every 4 years. You get your forms, you fill the forms. If you have acquired any other property different and apart from what you had 4 years back, that is about 2011, you needed to have done that, declare them in your forms.
So if there were if there were these encumbrances, why was he appointed Chief Justice of Nigeria in the first place? Were these infractions not discovered at the point where he was it in 2016?
2016.
2016, yes. October of 2016.
Yes. He came in eventually, it was sanctioned in 2017. But then look at it. I said political undercurrents are very clear in this. I would not say, and I will not stand here to say that all those infractions were not discovered way back at that time when he was nominated by AJC to be taken as a substantive CJN. They got those things they wanted. They had the dossier on him, and they kept the dossier. They did certain investigations. They kept it. They didn't say anything. Now, by virtue of certain things that I have seen in the open that have transpired, and all these things you can still link them up with Amici, Rivers State at that time, even for current Senate leader in Kwara, far back as Zana Naya, and all these things were summed up. Look, and the meetings, there are allegations that they saw this person somewhere in Dubai and all that, fraternizing with the opposing party and all that. Now, how do we put these people in check? They came around. Now, brought out these allegations against him. He could not say no. Very shameful.
All right.
And they had the hold on him.
Okay.
Asked him to resign honorably as a chief law officer, chief justice of Nigeria. Honestly, the best thing would have been for him to resign. Both the executive, yes, recuse himself, resign totally.
All right.
Both the executive and the judiciary are not clean on the side.
All right, let's now go back to senior advocate of Nigeria, Mr. Akin Onnoghen, I beg your pardon. Now, the maxim of law used to be de minimis non curat lex, which means the law of small things, the law does not concern itself. And you wonder, why are people crying so much about trying to bring the Chief Justice of Nigeria to the court of law?
And you wonder,
yes.
why are people crying so much about trying to bring the Chief Justice of Nigeria to the court of law? And you wonder, yes. About trying to bring
we are getting
whole back
yes.
there. A bit distracting.
Yes, but while we
to say the least,
while we rectify that,
The CGN is not one of trifles, like is anticipated by the maxim de minimis non curat lex. What is at issue here is an issue of serious constitutional process and procedure. The question that is in trial is the question of, was the head of an arm of government properly removed, from office? It's a serious matter. Now, let me remind you that in the case of the CJ of Abia, when he was removed, the removal was challenged. And Honorable Justice Stanko was in the Supreme Court. He was one of those people that decided that unless the NJC was part and parcel of his appointment, that appointment cannot stand. In fact, the panel in which Justice Stanko, JSC, also sat, retired the new CJN, the new CJ of Abia State, on the grounds that it humiliated the NJC and the Constitution. If you remember the case of Rivers State, a judge was similarly appointed, as CJ of the state, wrongfully. It was challenged, and the Supreme Court also said that unless they went through, the NJC, that appointment cannot stand. And therefore, Justice Okocha was sworn in as, you see, it is a question of procedure, and this is the procedure that this country under the Constitution has been following up to now. It is not a trifle. You see, because if it is possible to do such a monumental hacking, to the office of the CGN, then you can imagine what can happen to any other. And the judiciary is a pillar, it's one of the key pillars, the constitutional pillars that hold the constitutional government of Nigeria together. If we do violence, to it, if the processes of appointing or removing officers becomes uncertain, then we can only wait as of time for the consequences of the kind of violence which we are doing to the system. It is a very serious matter. It's a question of due process. It may take stress, it may take time, but we must try to be faithful to the provision of the Constitution when it comes to appointment, promotion, and discipline of our judicial officers.
All right, thank you very much. Akin Onigbide, Senior Advocate of Nigeria, joining us via Skype to talk about this developments. Thank you so much for joining us on the show. Let's take it to Abuja, where Barrister Kunle Edun is. He's the National Publicity Secretary of the NBA. So many questions really to be asked. Now, let me take it back to what our guest in the studio here said earlier, that the CJN really should have recused himself from being CJN until he's cleared. Alongside that, the presidency has been trying to explain this away, that really this is about corruption. The anti-corruption stance of this administration, which, you know, happens to be one of the 3 planks on which it came into power. And that this is what it's all about, that a lot of people seem to be, you know, distracted about the issue of process or procedure and forgetting the substance of the case here. Do you agree?
When we say the federal government of Nigeria is fighting corruption, corruption has many faces. It has many constituents. It's not all about financial improprieties or anything that has to do with fraud. When you abuse a process, when you violate a law, when you don't respect court orders, when you whimsically appoint, remove, without any justifiable reason, that is corruption. So, if the federal government is fighting corruption, it should be wholesome. It should be entire. It should not be selective. The disrespect to the order of the Court of Appeal is an act of corruption too. Removing the CJN without following due process is also an act of corruption. Now, on the issue of the CJN recusing himself, I think probably you're talking about the NJC sitting today, because the CJN is the chairman of the NJC. Of course, the NJC has already issued a statement that he will not be sitting as the chairman. He will not even be in attendance. And also, Honorable Justice Tanko Mohammed. So to that extent, he has recused himself from the proceedings of NJC today.
Sorry, if I may comment, not just the proceedings of today, which the NJC and of course the NBA and all the other legal bodies plan to hold emergency meetings today. When these allegations, you know, came up and there were doubts as to the integrity of the Chief Justice of Nigeria, whether for good or for bad, that the Chief Justice himself, seeing these questions around his integrity, should really have stepped down or step aside, if you like, from being CJN, from presiding over the highest level of Nigeria's judiciary, so that these issues can be investigated properly and, of course, a conclusion reached.
Now we are going into moral spheres. We live in the legal angle. The Nigeria Bar Association stands for due process, stands for rule of law, upholding the rule of law. It is the personal decision of the CJN whether to resign,
morality from the
abdicate the office, or however, say, I am no longer going to be the CJN. It is his personal decision. It is his discretion. Nobody can force him. But I know that it's an integrity issue. And it is his decision to make. It's not for the NBA to force him to leave the office of the CJN. By the way, let it be known to all Nigerians today that if the President of the Federal Government of Nigeria had followed due process, gone through the NJC, done the needful, and the CJN still refuses to leave, then as at that time, I believe the NBA will make the appropriate resolutions that would be in line with what you have just said. But for now, the foundation is very faulty. We don't want a situation where tomorrow an allegation can be made against a chief judge or a CJN and you now say he should resign. That means It's his personal decision. It's not for the NBA to make that decision for him.
All right, Barrister Kule Edun, National Publicity Secretary, Nigerian Bar Association. Well, thank you very much indeed for spending your time with us this morning.
Thank you very much.
All right, let's continue with you here in the studio. Well, you asked a question earlier, if morality could be detached from the law. You will respond to that, but I'd like to ask, the justice, that's the Justice Mohammed Tanko, takes over now, and he has already gone to work by inaugurating some, panels already. Now, my question is, can the president appoint another justice of the Supreme Court in an acting capacity when the first order has not been complied with, which is that the suspended CJN should step aside?
Well, excuse me. We're in a tight corner. It's very tough. You see, everybody's talking about rule of law, rule of law, rule of law. Yes, I also pitch my tent towards those people advocating for the rule of law. Rule of law must not be jettisoned in any way. Where that does not hold water, it does not stand, then you leave room for anarchy, where you have the breakdown of law and order. People begin to do what they like, and all things hell will get loose. But we'll also begin to look at it really. In a sane society, we don't want to begin to compare ourselves to countries like Kenya, countries like even Ghana there, where the operatives, the agencies, security agencies went to arrest the Chief Justice of that country while in the chambers, ready to sit for corruption allegations. And we all know what happened thereafter. We are quick to pick those good things in other countries, but all those ones that negate whatever we do here, we leave them aside. We talk ill about them, say no, that. But coming back to our country, coming back to Nigeria now, we are saying that, well, yes, issues of morality are there, issues of the law. Can you really separate morality from law? It has this morality is the one that has a human face to the law. The law is there. A society that has no law, that does not follow the law, does not strictly apply the law, will have a lawless society. When you have this law, don't you also have a human face to it? The human face is the moral angle that is there. Now you, as a Chief Justice of Nigeria, you have seen this, disbelievable,
well,
unbelievable.
The human face you talk about, I mean, if somebody
will have a lawless society. When you have this law, don't you also have a human face to it? The human face is the moral angle that is there. Now you, as a Chief Justice of Nigeria, you have seen this, disbelievable,
well,
unbelievable.
The human face you talk about, I mean, if somebody woke up and decided, hey, Mr. Lanre Ajanoku, you are suspected to have been involved in some fraudulent action, that jeopardizes your position as a senior lawyer and all of that, should morals come in? Would you say that morals really should be part of it? That, okay, well, since I've been accused of this,
and I have a position that I'm holding.
What?
And I have a position that I'm holding. Now, what I need, what you need to do is to confront me with that allegation. Confront me what I have done. And the Chief Justice of Nigeria was confronted with that allegation, written in the petition, and he was made to react to same. And he reacted and said, well, yes, I'm sorry. Over time, I actually forgot to declare my assets. But
which is part of what they
are holding on to.
Which is part of what the CCT says, that when the said officer owns up and says, oh, yes, these were infractions on my part.
Yes.
This was a mistake or whatever it chooses to call it.
Yes.
Then the case does not go further. Shouldn't that apply in this case?
No.
Okay.
No. If
all right.
I have a
is it open to his personal decision to step aside?
No.
Just like
if it is open, that is a conscience. If his conscience is alive, really, and kicking, that conscience would not make you want to stay a day further. Well, I resign. Let them investigate. If I'm guilty, I go. If not, I come back. But
are we looking at precedents here? In the case of Justice Nganjiwa versus the Federal Republic of Nigeria, that was resolved in the Court of Appeal with the judgment that, let me read it out, a judicial officer cannot be brought to criminal trial during the incumbency of his office except and until indicted by the NJC and removed from the bench.
I'll separate that from the issue of the CCB. CCB, listen, CCB, Code of Conduct Bureau, I want to separate it from any other matter or any other act. Any other act that I'm talking about will be that. Or infringement against any other law, or infraction against any other. An infraction against any other law has stipulated penalties for anybody who has gone wrong. The CCB too also has, in that one, you can be sentenced to imprisonment for acts that you have done or acts you left undone. But CCB has only 3, that you can be removed from office, you may not be able to hold office for another 10 years, or you forfeit those things that you did not declare. Right. Not more than that.
All right.
So that's why one will be able to draw the distinction.
All right. Well,
unfortunately,
all right. Unfortunately, we cannot continue beyond here. But Barrister Larawaju Ajanaku, a lawyer, a constitutional lawyer, we must thank you very much indeed for coming to share your thoughts with us.
It's a pleasure being here.
All right.